Okay, they won't have missed very much anyway. All right, so thanks for those. So you can see, and this is kind of a typical situation that happens on the 300-hour course, is that you'll come in wanting absolute answers and they're not necessarily there. Okay, so the idea is that we debate, that we talk. You will have different views from me. It's all fine. You're quite welcome to fight with me and argue and all of that kind of thing. So you can just see from that very simple question, which was, if I can't do a handstand, should I teach it? Should I teach a pose that I can't do? That you all had lots and lots of, there's yes and no's and maybes for Caro, okay? All a huge spectrum of answers depending on a lot of different variables, right? And which is, it's fantastic, because that's what we're doing as yoga teachers. We're teaching variables. We're teaching variables in the pose. We're teaching variables in the humans that we're teaching. We're teaching variables in styles, in movements, in all sorts of different things. So we have to look at things quite in a fine-tuned way. So my answer to Firdaus would be a combination of all of your answers. My first would be absolutely, me, personally, I would teach any pose that I believed somebody was capable in a non-damaging way of doing. End of story. Whether that's leg behind the head or a headstand, or if I believed that they were strong enough, they weren't regressing, they were progressing, I would teach that pose. But the qualification is me, okay? So, which buys into Martina's comment that as a brand new teacher, I'm not sure that I would have felt confident to teach certain poses. You know, even poses, so something like handstand was in my practice, because Ashtanga was my second yoga style, so we did quite a lot of handstands, so it was in my practice. But I remember when I first taught it, I was really nervous because I didn't know those people in the room. It was a class. And I made them all go to the wall, and I said, okay, for those that are ready to kick up, and I took them through what I thought was a decent process. And this guy kicked up so hard, he fell over to the side and wiped out 2 other people. And I felt awful. He actually really hurt himself. So I felt absolutely awful. And now that I look back on it, I think to myself, should I have done it? Probably yes, but I wasn't confident. But then again, you know, even if I was a confident teacher as I am now, I'll take anybody up into a handstand pretty much if I think that physically they're okay. It still could happen. That same scenario could happen. So I think, first of all, you need confidence as a teacher, and that you shouldn't be taking people into more challenging poses unless you are confident to do so. Like, you need to go and experiment on people you can break, you know, your family at home, your friends, all of those things. So, you know, that they will go, ow, you're really hurting me, stop that. Whereas a student in a class won't necessarily say that to you. They will be very quiet as you kind of hurting them. So I think Martina's absolutely right. I think that as we've done so many teacher trainings, and there's almost 2 camps. You get people that will go out and go, I want to adjust everybody all the time and teach every single pose. And then the other group that go, oh no, I don't want to teach anything that I can't do. But I think there's somewhere in the middle. I think we should all start as beginner teachers going, am I confident to do this? Can I read that person's body? So if I'm going to take them into handstand, you tell me, how would I assess whether I should take them into handstand or not? Roxy, do you have something to say, or is it a different question?
It was to add on what we are talking about, but to reply to your question first. You can assess by just looking at the strength, I mean, the flexibility, and like the shoulders, the flexion, like we say, like how much are they able to press, and maybe also, yes, what else? For handstand, probably the power to be able to push from the shoulder extension.
So what
else would you look at?
Exactly. So I think that's great. So let's say shoulder strength. So where would we see that? If we're teaching Because I'm not talking about in a private where we can really, get in there. I'm talking in a class. Where would we see that people may or may not have the required strength for handstand? In what poses? Janine?
So in like high crescent lunge. Okay, sorry, I'm muting.
Sorry, Janine?
Obviously, you have to have a class prepared. So you're preparing to do a handstand class, and you take your students through the class with the necessary poses that you need to do. And in that, you can assess. And also then say to the students, this is not a class to possibly do a handstand, but we are training towards it. And during that, you'll be able to see who will be able to get into the full expression of the pose and who won't.
Okay, so what pose would we be able to tell, Tegan?
Plank, down, plank, crow, anything. Just an arm balance, plank, anything on your hands, just
down,
shoulders.
And what about hold? So yeah, one by one, because it just goes like this when you all talk. So so just try. I know it's hard, and I want you all to chat. So okay, let's take plank. What in plank? Just plank to down dog. What?
No, holding plank, building strength in your plank.
Holding plank, right? Okay. So how long would somebody be able to? Would you think it would be a good idea for them to be able to hold a plank? How long would it be?
At least longer than 3 seconds.
Sorry, put your hand up, just because I can't actually see who's talking. Hey, Claire, yeah?
Sorry, at least longer than 3 seconds, because obviously when you're going into handstand, you want to be able to have that push and lift before you just collapse and die on the floor. So you need to be able to hold it. I don't want to say 30 seconds, but a decent amount of time to imagine your leg just popping up and down. But if they're collapsing like 2 seconds in, you're like, just wait.
Okay, so there you go. So first of all, we've got, okay, how long do we hold a plank? How many people are happy here to get the people in their class to hold plank for 30 seconds? Who's not happy to do that? All happy to do that? Okay, so therefore we can assess that. So plank, down dog, hold, okay? If somebody's fairly strong in that, then we've got, okay, we think that maybe they can go into handstand. So what else about handstand? What is the thing we're scared of the most as teachers, taking people into handstand? Janine?
I think it's fear. So possibly if you're in Uttanasana or down dog and say to them, let's step, hop, jump towards forward folds. Obviously, if the people can jump nicely with control into a forward fold, you kind of know that they're possibly strong enough to kick up, even if they're using the wall to get into a handstand.
Okay, so I'll challenge you back there and go, okay, they can hold Tegan's 30-second plank, but they can't jump forward.
No, I still think they could possibly attempt it.
So you think they could possibly attempt it. So what are we scared that people will do when they go into a handstand?
Fall on their head.
Fall on their head. Okay, so that's our fear, right? And their fear as well. So we're scared they're going to fall on their head. So the first thing we can do is we go the strength thing, right? They're strong enough to go up there. But does that, for those who've been teaching for quite a while, does that preclude them from falling over in a handstand?
No.
Why do people, if they've got enough strength, why do people fall over in a handstand? Caro, I'll get you next, Tegan, and then Claire.
I think part of it can be too much momentum, like if it's like too much of a momentum kick than a controlled lift.
Yes, so tying into Janine's idea of trying to see what they are like in momentum, jumping from down dog to Uttanasana. So the momentum, but what about the momentum? What happens? Sorry, who was next? Tegan was next, then Claire.
Me. The other thing I think that happens with people in handstand, and I think it ties into what happened maybe with your guy, is I think that if you've never done a handstand in your life, you don't know what's happening. It's completely unfamiliar. It's the first time you are on your hands and the first time you're doing this. I remember like the first time I did headstand at a wall, I also fell over sideways. Like thank goodness no one was there, but I also just why I don't know. But handstands, I see it often in classes. What I do see is I haven't seen people falling, but I do see people buckling, and it's usually not a strength thing. It's almost just, it's like a whoa, what's going on, and then they panic. It's just, and it's all new. So I think it's like it's what you're also doing in handstands is you're teaching people a new movement if they've never done cartwheels, handstands, gymnastics.
Exactly. So that was the other thing I was looking for, is frequently it's not all of those things, strength, the momentum. Some people, they don't know how much momentum to use. They get a fright, and they do a beautiful kick. They get up there and they go, oh, what happened? And they collapse. Like those are all of them. Claire, you were going to all of the potential things. Claire, you were going to say something?
Now I'm going to add to that. So what we do in at our studio is we actually teach people to fall, because one of the biggest fears in handstands is falling. If you learn to fall without like wounding yourself, like going sideways or whatever, tucking your head and tucking, already that pulls away that fear. So there's less fear going into the handstand. So that's a fun thing to do. But also, I personally feel core strength is so key and integral when you're going into handstand. If you've got a weak core and handstanding, you're just going to buckle and wiggle and perish. But that's my feeling, my theory.
So my answer to you is twofold. One is, how do you teach bailing in a vinyasa class? And my second comment to you, and you'll shout at me, but I'll prove it to you, there is no core requirement in handstand. None.
I'm looking forward to that conversation.
We'll talk about it a lot. And as I say, you are so welcome to disagree with me. Your teachers, do what you like. I will show you stuff, and then you can either completely deny it and go, I don't believe you, I don't care what you're saying, and carry on with your own thing, or maybe you'll change your mind. That's the whole idea. You can also change my mind, okay? I change my mind every month on different things because new research comes out. So there is no core requirement in handstand at all. I'm sorry, but there is. I'll send you a good video that'll prove it. Roxy.
Okay.
So let me go back to Claire. Sorry, Roxy, just hang on a sec. I beg your pardon. Claire, I asked you, a question. So if you're teaching a vinyasa class, how would you bring bailing in?
Okay, I'm actually unsure because I don't really teach vinyasa. I focus on hatha, so we can focus on each doodad. Vinyasa, I don't know, you would throw it into one of your sun salutations, run around, fall after
Roxy?
For vinyasa, probably, I mean, the easiest way to kind of go to handstand in vinyasa is from maybe standing split, where you do a couple of hops, or downward facing dog, when you do kind of like donkey kicks, where you can land back on your feet instead of having to fall forward, especially if you have a lot of people. So that kind of like lead to my next question, that what do you do with all the people that are super flexible with their spine? Like me, my mechanism is to always fall into wheel and then go up straight away after any kind of handstand, because I know I have that flexibility. And I always felt like I need to bring my ribs in and pull my core in, kind of to bring everything back to my midline to stop me there, not having to fall backwards. So what would you kind of like give as an advice for the people that are like that?
Okay, so we'll do more in detail when we go more after this weekend, when you've done some handstand work. Yeah, so definitely if you're very mobile, it's shoulder mobility, not necessarily spinal mobility, that actually creates that drop back. Okay, so normally definitely bringing attention to your ribs, bringing yourself into a line. But a lot of the time what works in that instance, don't want to go into it too much because it'll get away from what we're talking about, is for people that are super mobile, their arms can go way behind their head. It's in fact drawing down into the shoulder socket. It's a very different cut. Most handstand is pushing up, but often for flexible people, it's actually the opposite. It's almost sinking into the shoulder socket, starting sunk. So you've got that. So you're not, because normally it's not your spine that's causing you to go over. It's literally the lock of your shoulders, and probably that you're not using your forearms. It depends. I have to look at you. Okay. Anybody else got? So Claire, have you got? Oh, Lisa, you've got a hand up down there.
Okay, the two things, the hamstring flexibility, because that's going to prevent having to kick so massively. The closer you can walk into the wall before you kick. So the hamstring flexibility is also as well as the shoulder. And obviously drishti, where you're looking, is going to make a difference to the hold.
That's the thing with handstand is you know, a lot of the more advanced poses that we do, other than if we consider things like putting your leg behind your head, advanced pose, that's a flexibility orientated pose. But all of the other things, when we're doing handstand, when we do the more advanced arm balances, they also require a huge amount of central nervous system patterning. Okay, it's skill work to do them. So that brings in things like how much do you have to kick, where do you look, what's going on with your hands, lining up your shoulders again and again and again. So I mean, the answer is that it's a really complex question. It's a really hard pose to teach in a vinyasa class. I think Hatha, Claire, is like much better because you can actually just stop and, you know, get people at a wall and things like that. But it's a very challenging thing. And it comes with risks. So back to Firdousa's original question, you've got to be comfortable enough, if you're going to teach it, that people may fall. And then what are you going to do if somebody falls? If you've got a Roxy in your class who goes over into a back bend, or somebody who just goes sideways, some like gung-ho guy who just wants to get up there and wipes up it, what are you going to do? How are you going to manage it? Tegan?
So obviously this is not during COVID, but usually I'm adjusting in my classes so I can catch in handstands if I need to, and I feel very confident in that. So those types of adjustments really help. So when I see people who I'm like, especially those big guys, big stiff guys, I'm like, okay, like you might get up, but then you don't know what's happening up there either. So like helping the people who you can quickly tell they're going to need me in front of them, and also giving people options to move to the wall. I always even now, like teaching online, I say like, now's a good time to go to the wall. If you want to go to the wall, like go right now. And that type of just, be the boss of what you're about to do as well, because I think, yes, I can take responsibility, but also, especially online, not really in this, but I've got to teach responsibly. So, but it's also up to the student to go, I'm very scared, or this is the first time I'm doing forearm stand or handstand and I'm going to freak out. Let me go to the wall. Like those are calls you can make. So I think just empowering your students with the options of go to the wall if you want to, like, and sometimes I say, if you feel uncomfortable, that's also fine. Like if people don't want to do forearm stand, do dolphin, but you're doing something, you're not doing nothing. Absolutely. I think it's a good idea.
And so that puts yet another layering on top of Firdousa's question. It's where are you teaching? A, does it have walls? B, is the yoga studio that you're teaching at, if it's not yours, do they allow you to actually stop teaching the modern vinyasa class and make everybody go to the wall? So it's become such a huge question that you kind of have to tick all the boxes. But my question to you guys is, if someone falls, how are you going to handle it? And it's not in like a nice private vinyasa, a private by Firdouse, a nice private class. Claire?
I think, okay, so I tend to make everything about games. So I teach aerial. Occasionally people fall. And I usually, one of the biggest issues of in class when people fall is the embarrassment. Other than getting hurt, you might hurt yourself, but embarrassment, people are like, oh my gosh, I fell, the world is ending. And I try to turn it into a game, basically. So I'm like, haha, yay, falling's the funnest part. Are you okay? Are you feeling all right? Anything so? No, cool, carry on. Exactly. Sort of like, if you fall off the horse, hop back on.
I would agree with that 100%, because also how is somebody, unless, of course, if they're hurt, you're going to know immediately, because they're just going to lie there half broken. Yeah. Okay? But what is their overriding emotion going to be? Those people that have fallen over, or the person that has fallen over, how are they going to feel when they fall over?
Usually embarrassment.
Exactly. Really embarrassed. And they're going, even if they slightly saw, you're going to say to them, are you okay? They're going to go, yeah, I'm fine. And you just need to move on and let them be. Okay, so I want to bring it back because we got not sidetracked, it's all very good and stuff. I want to bring it back to your little bits of homework that you had to do, the pose analysis. Claire, do you have another question, or is your hand just up?
It was up for the beginning one, so I'm going to lower it until we get back to the
Let's go back
anatomy
to
stuff.
the beginning one. You ask your question now because it might guide us.
Okay, but it's a lot because I think this might be loaded. You were talking about debate. This is going to bring in debate, but there are 2 questions. The first one I think is just a quickie baby one. So in the notes, you talk about how the shape of the socket is actually going to either inhibit or allow like those movements like splits and whatnot. And I just wondered, so if you had a very small socket, so thereby you wouldn't necessarily be able to get into a flat split. I mean, could you, through practice, eventually your socket might, I don't know, allow more movement, or is that it? Sorry for you, your hips are never going to let you get there.
No. So if we look at Colin's leg, okay, so these skeletons that you see knocking around, they're nothing as strong as bone. Bone is like way stronger. So there's the socket head with a little bit of a screw on it. This is like a hip replacement skeleton, okay?
Yeah.
This is the ball of the leg. There's my socket. Okay, what is going to happen when I take my leg out to the side? Hip abduction. What's happening?
It's hindering you from moving to a certain, or moving further, right?
Yeah. If I've got a deep socket, and this is a side socket, very difficult for me to hold actual big Colin. I need to get him on a stand. Okay, so if I do it on my own, I don't know if you guys can see me. There's my hip, right? Over here is the socket, right? The side of the hip. Okay, and everybody's socket is totally and utterly different. Okay, so if my socket is deep, this would be a deep socket, and it's facing the side, that means, depending on the shape of this as well, when I take my leg out to the side, so that's abduction. So that's this move. Okay?
Yeah.
If you can't see me, then pin me, right? That bone, which is your greater trochanter of your leg, is going to hit that.
Okay.
End of story. Not only the deep socket, but you can have a socket that faces forward. Okay? If your socket faces forward, it's even worse, okay? Because it's going to hit even sooner. Okay? It doesn't allow hardly any range, but some people's sockets face slightly backwards. The interesting thing was my husband had a hip op. He's a surfer, and he needed a hip op. And they gave him not quite a choice, but a range of options as to where his socket would be. So in the hip replacement, it depends where they go in. So they do hip replacements from the front, from the side, and from the back. And the socket is different. It's shaped differently. So his leg moves differently now, but not because it's better, but because he's got a better hip socket. It's got more information. So there is nothing you can do as a grown adult. We'll talk in the hip section, we'll talk a little bit more about what happens, especially to teenage girls, because all of the bones that form the hip, the pelvis, they actually fuse together when you're a teenager. So there is some room for mobility there. So if somebody's got a very wide socket, so it's like a flat socket, that means their range of motion is just going to be amazing. So the people that can do side splits, so not front splits also has a bearing, but side splits, they've got really open sockets and they're able to move in a range that we are not able to move. Going back to Kaylee, who was that super mobile trainee of mine, she could do, not only could she do side split, she'd take her legs behind her. I mean, it was, I used to have to say to her, "No, Kelly, you can't do that. People are going to get freaked out. Bring your legs back." You know, just how our hips move, but there's nothing we can do about them. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's exactly it. Because my follow-on thought was, obviously these kids who've been doing splits and takalani sesame, that's actually how they get that motion in, or that movement in, so easily, because they've essentially, during that, you said the teenage phase is when your hips sort of solidify in where they are.
The acetabulum, the actual socket, that's made of 3 bones that fuse when you're in your, it starts in your teens with puberty. It's women's hips growing, so we, you know, can have babies at the end of it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that because you can't make that socket bigger unless the head of the femur, the leg, is big too. So it doesn't mean if you're going to do ballet all the time that you're going to form a socket that is wide, because you actually need the material to do it. So it's quite complicated. And your other
okay, that's getting into alignment, because now I wanted to say, so my feeling is, I do this with almost everything. You need alignment and you don't need alignment. It's like that in-between place. But what I wanted to grasp was, so for instance, we were talking about let's go with is it shoulder flexion? You're lifting your arm up. And when you're not in alignment, let's say the elbow is slightly bent, let's say you can only get to 160 degrees up, but the moment you bring your arm into alignment, all of a sudden you can get further. So yeah, I'm struggling with you don't need alignment.
Define what you think alignment is.
Okay, it would be getting into, I'm going to call it a more optimal positioning. So in my mind, a lot of us, our bodies are in dysfunction, or the muscles are in dysfunction, whether you've got some muscles that have been weak, and as a result other muscles are coming in to compensate for them, etc., etc., and that's caused by your let's call it a combination of the bones and the muscles not being in correct alignment or optimal positioning. So then your alignment
positioning for what, Claire? Optimal positioning for what? You can't just optimal positioning for what? So I can say so let's explore it, because it's all worth an explore. Is okay, my shoulders must be in optimal positioning for Bakasana, crow. My shoulders must be in optimal positioning for Urdhva Dhanurasana, wheel. They're totally different shapes, totally different. Yes. One's protraction, the other shoulder flexion. So what's the optimal positioning?
Oh, I suppose then it would relate to the pose, but then you would still be going in. So let's go for back bending. You're still wanting optimal, I'm going to just go optimal positioning, where your elbow is sort of closer into your body, where, you know, you see some people whose elbows flare out while they're trying to do their back bend, which ends up hurting in the shoulders and things. So that's where I'm thinking that's the kind of alignment you're wanting, the elbows closer to your head to be in less pain and potentially get you deeper into the pose. Does that work?
Okay. So there's a few things there. So the one thing is you're saying bring your shoulders in closer to your ears, okay? Because you're saying that that's going to help the pose and pain. Those are two things, right? Okay. So look, I'm a good example of this, all right? So I've got I shouldn't say fairly restricted shoulder flexion. I've got slightly restricted shoulder flexion, okay? So guess how I do back bends? That's how far out I take my arms to push up.
Okay.
Because, so if I straighten my arms, I stop here at my ear. If I take my arm further back, further out to the side, look how much more shoulder flexion I get.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, sorry, I'm getting sun in here now. I'm getting all hot. I'm in this weird thing. So my first point is you said that this is a good alignment, and please don't get me wrong that I'm saying that any of it is wrong, but you're saying it's a good alignment for everybody. it's optimal for everybody, but it's not. So Roxy, okay, so what Roxy's just told us that she's super flexy, right? So her arms, and I'm going to have to twist to the side, are going to be back there. So Roxy's going to be able to have her arms like way behind here, whereas I can't. So in my interpretation of that, the alignment or the optimal alignment for Roxy and for me are totally different. So therefore, there can't be alignment per se for a group. But if you're talking about pain, alignment is so if Roxy said, she goes, oh, I've got pain in my shoulder when I drop from a handstand into a back bend, not surprisingly, but in a back bend, and I go, I've got pain in my shoulder in a back bend. What are the chances that they're the same cause or the same pain?
Not necessarily true. Because
It's like, so if you look, Colin, okay, so can you see this tiny little thing here? Okay? Yeah. That's the socket of the shoulder. So there's Colin from the front, there's his collarbones, there's a little socket of the shoulder, and Colin's sockets are facing slightly kind of diagonally forward, right? The arm bone literally suspends from there. It doesn't sit in a socket like the hip. It suspends from there. But all of us, just as one simple example, have got different shaped clavicles, collarbone, right? So and I'm not saying this is why Roxy's flexy and I'm not, because there's a whole load of different bones going on. But again, like the hip, when I take my arm up, I hit the clavicle, and that stops me from going up. Whereas someone like Roxy, her clavicle may be higher, she may have a bigger joint capsule or longer ligament, and so when she takes it up, it doesn't even go anywhere near the clavicle. In fact, the clavicle doesn't even feature. She's going back here. So there, in my mind, then what's the alignment?
See, but now it would confuse me as well, because...
Get to you, Eva?
Pardon?
I'm just saying I'm going to get to you, Eva, after Claire's spoken.
Okay. So when I think about, so you're bringing in the bone element, so I can grasp that, but how would you know when it's bone and when it's muscular? Because from my understanding, again, so if your arm isn't able to get further back, often it's tightness that's pulling across the intercostals. You release these guys and often you can go further, right? But then, or it could be bone. But it's almost like, where would alignment come into place so that people aren't hurting themselves when they haven't learned how to utilize their muscles to work with their body properly? Does that make sense?
Okay, I'm going to answer one quick thing, and then I'm going to move, sorry, Eva, I'm going to move to Cara, because I forgot Cara's up first. So what I'm going to say to you is, think about this. If somebody's going to push up into wheel, into Urdhva Dhanurasana, how do you know whether their muscles aren't able to do that, or aren't capable to do that, or will hurt themselves? What will, don't answer the question, think about it. What's going to hurt? What's not strong enough, and what do you have to do to get them stronger? So I want you just to think of that, because I just want to get to Cara, and then Eva's disappeared. Cara, sorry, I've been keeping you waiting for a while.
No, all good. It's super interesting to listen to all these questions. I have a question regarding, I mean, yoga injuries, but like the mild variation, you know, you're like in a class and then afterwards a student comes up, or the week later a student comes and says something like, oh, I think I've pulled my hamstrings last week. And so from the anatomy slides, we know that the tendons and ligaments are super strong, and it's very difficult to actually tear them or even rip them during this low impact yoga practices. So what I'm just wondering then is like, what are these like perceived like tears that we sometimes experience in a yoga class? You know what I mean?
Again, it's not a question I can answer with absolute certainty, because there is no absolute certainty. There's my opinion in this, and most of my opinion, pretty much all of it actually, in terms of things like this, is based on research. So if we're talking, it depends what we're talking about. First of all, people come, the reason, why do people get sore? When do you get sore? Take it.
You get stiff or sore after you use your body, and maybe you use your body too hard.
Okay, so exactly. So pretty much, other than if we take away, they haven't fallen over and you haven't jumped on top of them trying to adjust them and broken them. If the person is sore, it is normally because they've used muscle tendons that they may not have used before in a certain way. So they've used it too much, put too much load on, and done it too frequently, and then they get sore. If it's a tendon, proper tendon tear issue, it's going to be something that is being caused outside of the yoga room, and that it's getting niggled, basically. There's also, and I don't want to go down this very, very dark path, there's also a lot of research now that is showing that hamstring tendon tears are actually not, which we think of as a pull, right, are actually not, that they are compressive injuries. They are bone injuries. So there's don't worry about it. We'll talk about it a lot in that, not a lot, but we'll talk about it in the hamstring thing, that it may be compressive. But generally, it's people, exactly like Tegan has said, they've done too much too soon, and they need to back off. And it's like a kind of classic yoga thing, which I'm sure we all know. We go in there and you go, okay, inhale, exhale, fold forward. If you can, take a bind of your big toe. And every single person in the room wants to hold their big toe, no matter what, okay? So too much load too soon. So I prefer the term sort of, you can call it yoga injury, but it's a niggle in yoga more than, you know. I know one person who's torn their hamstring in yoga properly, and that's what they did was they went and had a really hot bath. Then they went to a yoga class, and this is a senior Iyengar yoga teacher. Then they went to a hot yoga class, and their hamstring popped off the bone. It makes a noise, it goes pop, and pops up the bone. Okay, sorry, Eva, then Anya. Eva.
Now you can hear me. I just wanted to add to the discussion about the alignment and what is the efficient or the best, the optimal alignment. And we talked already about that it might be compromised by like bones or whatever, that the person, that every person is different. But even if a person can do a certain perceived optimal alignment, I'm not so sure if there is an optimal alignment, because if I have a look at, we are looking at movement and at moving our body, and movement is more or less regulated by the brain, and we want to be able, everyone wants to be able to move efficiently in the most variety of situations that can arise somehow. And how movement takes place is that we get a lot of sensory informations from all our senses, and we process that in our brain, and our brain also has some kind of map of our body that is influenced by the sensory information that comes in. And then there is a motor map as well, where the brain then produces the movement, and the shape and the precision of these maps is directly correlated to how many information comes in. So if I always do one thing, just one particular way, my brain has no way to learn all the little details around that. And so I think it's very important for us, if we want to move in a continuum of movement in an efficient way, to feed our bodies with as much information as possible, sensory, and then also the other way around if we try different motor patterns, so that the so-called homunculus, the sensory and the motor one, that they are as detailed as possible. So maybe even an alignment which is not perceived as optimal might be a good thing for someone to try. We had that yesterday in the discussion with Laura, that it's sometimes good to try something new that is not familiar to us, to just, you know, to learn something new, because whenever we learn something new, we gain something, and that gives us, and then pain also plays a role in that, that gives us more information, that gives us more control, and more control is also always translate into less pain, because the brain perceives less threat. If I just try to summarize that in a very, very not precise way.
So I think it's a good point in a very simple way to consider, which is that, so it's often easier, I find, when there are these big concepts to actually bear down. Lisa, I'll be with you in a second, to bear down, to bring it into one small thing. So let's take an example of chaturanga, okay? So I think most of you will have come across the optimal alignment for chaturanga. Yes or no? Okay, so it's no different to, you know, have your elbows in close when you're going up into Urdhva Dhanurasana. And in chaturanga, the optimal alignment is this kind of side, shoulders rolled back and lowering down to the floor, pushing up if you're a really mean teacher like me, okay? So that is the optimal alignment for chaturanga. And if you go and have a look, just do a quick Google search, there'll be hundreds of things that will say, if you have the elbows doing this, if you have the elbows doing this, if you have the elbows wide apart, if you don't have this 90-degree alignment, you will injure, okay? That you need to get the right alignment to prevent the injury. But what does that, there's Claire. When people pop on, then you all change. And I'm like, where have you gone? So what does that mean? What are we trying to say by saying that your arms have to be in one position? What does chaturanga look like that isn't chaturanga? A push-up, right? It's exactly the same as a push-up. In fact, to be absolutely clear, it's an eccentric push-up. It means that you're in a push-up position and you're lowering to the ground, okay? And it's only in yoga that we're saying, no, when you do it, you must be exactly like this, otherwise things are going to fall apart, right? But how many different types of push-up varieties are there?
Lots.
This. And that ties into what Eve is saying, is that our shoulders have a range of movement, okay? My shoulder can do like all of these things. What is more key for me personally, instead of alignment per se, is do you have the strength in that range, the strength to make that movement? There's no good, like, I always say to the 200 arts, in chaturanga, there's no good telling a whole load of people who can't even do a tricep dip on their knees that they must be aligned in this chaturanga way, because you can't. It's really hard. You know, you go down to the gym and you say to your personal trainer, hello, personal trainer, I'd like to do push-ups. I've never done a push-up. What do you think, how are they going to start you off?
On your knees.
On your knees or at the wall. They're not going to bring in 40 push-ups and expect you to do them in this absolutely rigid way, but they're going to, you can be strong in any of those ranges. So if I could do the super flexy Urdhva Dhanurasana, I would do it, okay? I would do it because it would create a different range of strength for me in just a different shoulder movement. So as much as my shoulders can do protraction, and they can also protract here, and they can protract there. It's all different degrees of, again, my opinion, it's all different degrees of strength in different ranges, doing different things. And for the classic thing is, I can like rock up chaturangas, like give me chaturangas any day. Ask me to do a press up like this, I'm a pathetic mess, okay? But I know it's not because it's dangerous, and it's not because, it's because I haven't actually trained it. I haven't trained strength in that particular area. So something like Urdhva Dhanurasana, I had, you know, I did Shivananda, then Ashtanga, then Iyengar, and I got beaten up by all of those people who insisted that my arms do this, that they draw in, otherwise they wouldn't let me come up into Urdhva Dhanurasana. They would shout, I mean, I did yoga in strict days. They would shout, and I used to battle and back. I mean, I hated wheel, it was terrible. And then I ignored them all, learned anatomy, and then I put my hands wherever I want my hands. My elbows do that, literally, because I get more range. So my elbows are wider, where someone like Roxy can probably do it like tight. Okay, here, look at this. My arms are short. Look what I look like when I try to put my palms together. Should give you a good laugh. Okay. I can't get my arms better. A, they're short, so I can't get my head through. So I like this, wide, gives me more shoulder flexion. So it's that getting strong and training movement in different strengths. Like we did, buying back into Eva's thing, we don't have to do the same thing all the time. It's just movement, in my view. But this is a long journey, this course. So let's talk more about it and challenge me all the time. Lisa, to you, because we're running out of time.
Okay, two things. One, which wasn't going to say, but it's just come up now, talking about the chaturangas and the tucking the elbows in. Obviously, it's going to make a difference with the muscle application. You do a push-up out here, it's pecs and shoulders. You do a push-up here, it's triceps. So if you're trying to build tricep strength, that's why you want to be cueing, trying to get people as close to that alignment, even if they've got to drop on their knees. But just because you want that, because you want the tricep strength to build up. But what I was going to...
Sorry, carry on.
The other point, which is what I put my hand up for originally, was we were talking about why do people get niggles in yoga classes, and I can't remember, I think it was Claire, said it's because you're using muscles and parts of your body you're not used to using. Just using myself as an example, if I get a niggle, it's completely the opposite, because I'm quite strong, but I've got a lot of, like in the thing you said, you've already got a pre-existing injury and it's hanging by a thread. So my niggle would come from that. So, you know, all my injuries, but so my point is, in a big vinyasa class, you're saying, well, it doesn't really matter about alignment, but you do need to cue that correct alignment, because you don't know in that class, say there's 30 people in there, you don't know who else is hanging by a thread, or you don't know who's weak and who's injured, and that's why you would try and cue that correct alignment.
Okay, so I'll give you an example. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Okay, so if we're talking, let's talk injury now, all right? So if you guys need to pop off, then go for it, okay? Because we're getting to 1 o'clock. So say you have a mild rotator cuff tendonitis. So in other words, forget, if you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. Your shoulder's a bit sort of, say you actually have a rotator cuff tear, but you've got no pain, okay? Totally possible, happens all the time, okay? Rotator cuff tear and you've got no pain. So how are you going to cue the right alignment in Urdhva Dhanurasana that's going to protect the person with rotator cuff tear? Sorry. You can't. You cannot. What you can do is go, the person said, hi, I've got a rotator cuff tear. You can actually say, okay, maybe you shouldn't be doing Urdhva Dhanurasana, wheel perhaps if it hurts you. But you cannot cue protective alignment.
But no, you were saying, like the example you used in the slide was about the knee going over the toes, or the knee going over the ankle. Now, that would be quite I'm trying to use a different example because I couldn't think of anything for that one. But I mean, that would be a cue that you could use, because that could potentially, if somebody who is hanging by a thread, that could make a the difference, just to keep
again,
not to do it.
You wouldn't know that anybody's hanging by a thread, and also you don't know that the thread is going to break because their knee goes over their ankle. And then you'd have to go, oh wow, I've got to really change my entire class, because then you can go, okay, warrior 2, warrior 1, knee over the ankle, but then you best not get them into malasana squats or skandasana or bend their knee in pigeon and get them to lie on top of it. It's, you know, if you think about how many people are out there with potential injuries or hanging by a thread issues, as a teacher, you can't cater to them in terms of alignment cueing. Like, I'll challenge you, has anybody here come across anybody whose knee has exploded or done something because their knee has gone over their ankle?
It's not possible.
It's not possible. The point is, it's very, and again, don't take me as absolute fact. As we go along, you'll get so many anatomy videos, and then you'll come back at me and go, hang on a second, and challenge me. Go for it. Do. But I'm going to challenge you back and say, you know, I do not think, in fact, I think it's actually impossible. The word alignment to me means you've created a shape. That you cannot cue alignment for injury protection, but we explore every single bit as we go along and see if, so in Lisa's case, it's a hip issue. In Lisa's case, I know what's going on, so I can say, Lisa, don't do it. She does it anyway, but I can say, Lisa, don't do it because it's going to hurt you. And she goes, just today, I'll just do it today. But the point is, then I can cue, but I'm not cueing alignment, I'm cueing pain prevention. Anya.
Hi. Yeah, there's so many things about alignment. One of them being, I think that the student themselves have to have a duty of care for their own body, because they're the only ones that know what they're feeling and how far they can, what their range of motion is. And then in terms of the correct alignment, that looks good and that's symmetrical, we could kind of use that maybe as a kind of a guideline, because we know not everybody's symmetrical, not everybody can get into that position. So then as teachers, we then need to be able to offer suggestions for them, you know, for more space, or to use a block or a strap or something like that, so that they can get into their alignment.
And so it's those two worlds of debate, that alignment is either shape, and people come and they want to do a trikonasana that looks like this. They don't want to do one that looks like this. So we want them aligned that way. And then there's the other debate that alignment is protective from injury. So there's such a lot going on just in that one with Taryn.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask a quick question then, in terms of the cueing of the alignment, because let's say you have someone who's always in the gym and, like you say, does a push-up like this and can do 100,000 of them, and then as soon as you start to cue the chaturanga and you want like the optimal anatomical stack of your elbows inward, and then you kind of do that, and they automatically resolve to this because they're stronger there and they can do a lot of push-ups but not a chaturanga, wouldn't you still want to correct them to a chaturanga rather than this kind of a push-up?
So again, many answers. The first thing would be, can they actually be corrected to that shape? So that would be my first thing, because, and I don't mean can they be corrected to that shape even though they're not strong enough in that. I mean, you know, often you get, especially with guys, you get people with very big arms and lats coming down here, and they literally cannot get into that shape. They're always in a little bit, if their lats come down here, they're always in a bit of that shape, okay? Slightly out to the side. So that's the first thing that I would look at, because they might not be able to. You know, it's chaturanga, the yogi chaturanga is quite small girls doing it most of the time. So I'd look at that. And the next thing is, yeah, I definitely challenge them to, it's again, buys into Eva's thing, is it? I would challenge them going, we're going to do a different range now, because it's really hard. It's different. It's really hard, chaturanga. It really is. You are doing such eccentric pec work. triceps, it's a really hard pose, and at that angle, even harder. Most women can't do it very well. So absolutely, I would challenge them to do it. And also if it was like a cocky guy, even more so, I would like, you can do it like that and see. But, you know, it's all different ranges. And as far, you know, like Lisa's comment on that, if somebody's injured, you know, hanging by a thread, then we have to adjust for that. That is something there. But, you know, there's all of the ranges are acceptable. But then we come back to the fact that we're teaching yoga. You know, we don't want press ups like this. That's different. What we're looking for is chaturanga. We're looking for that, let's not use the word alignment, but shape. We're looking for a shape, you know, and everybody's shape is going to be different depending on levels of strength in chaturanga, triceps, etc., and, you know, flexibility in trikonasa. But we're moving them as teachers towards a shape. And I think I say it on the video as well, and the people that come to yoga actually want that shape. Do you know what I mean? They maybe a guy who's a bit sort of ego-wise, you know, wants to do wide push-ups and doesn't want to do what you want him to do, maybe then. But generally, as a rule, most people want to go, I want to do that. I want to sort of look like that. I want to move towards a shape as much as I possibly can. So, has anybody, Roxy, you've got something to say? Or is your hand still up? You've got something.
I have something to say. I disconnected, so I don't know if you have answered this question or not. But regarding, again, with hyper mobility and flexibility, so, you know, in chaturanga, a lot of people have the kind of elbow coming out forward like that. And a lot of teachers, like even myself, say, you know, not to hyper kind of extend your joint or even your knees when you are in triangle pose. You kind of need to bend a little bit in your elbow. You have to bend a little bit in your trikonasana. So is that again because the teachers want to bring that safety in, and there's actually nothing wrong with having hypermobility joints? For example, in chaturanga, what would you say?
It depends on what's going on. It depends on what is going on, because if somebody's, in my opinion, in terms of my experience of teaching a lot of people, as many people have pain in elbows or knee joints that don't have hypermobility as people that do. And the first thing we've got to say is that hypermobility, true hypermobility, is a genetic disorder, okay? You get diagnosed by a doctor, it affects all of your connective tissue, your skin, your joints, your tendons, all of those people. I've only had one in 20 odd years, one true hypermobile student, and it was unbelievable. You would just, anything that you did that involved a stretch, she would just stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch. I mean, it was unbelievable, like in every area of her body, knees, ankles, all of that. That what yoga teachers are taught is that if you've got this bend in your elbow, that it's bad and it's going to cause injury. All of the research, research shows that it is not indicative of injury. It's the same as having, so it doesn't mean you won't get injured, but often what happens with people that have got, let's say, joints that hyperextend rather than using hypermobility, joints that hyperextend, is they often really drawn to things like gymnastics, ballet, yoga, all of those things. So we just get more of those people because it gives, hyperextension gives you more range, but it doesn't mean that somebody who just hyperextends their knee a little bit or their elbow is going to get any injury of any kind, as long as they have progressively loaded, like taking it back to the our hamstring stuff. If they've progressively loaded and they're not hanging by a thread somehow, then they can actually, they're fine. So I always say to people, I've got mild hyperextension of the elbows. So you can say to me, bend my elbows. So why is there a problem with me not having, when would you say bend your elbows? Let's ask that question. So when would you be instructed to bend, micro bend the elbows? Or knees, let's say elbows.
Like that chaturanga.
Yeah, chaturanga.
My,
dog.
do you mean in plank and 2 chaturanga?
No, more like a plank.
Yeah, plank.
To that.
Plank. So in plank, so load bearing pose, so that they are worried that things are going to go on. So it's very difficult to show you because Colin's actually, he's quite hyperextending. This is his arm, okay? So what all hyperextension is that the joint, can you see, he's just going back, the joint just stops further back, okay? Does that make sense? So if you were aligned and dead straight, the joint would stop here because there's the, okay, goes forward like that, and then it comes up, goes straight, and it would lock here, okay? Bone would go into bone, but that's just a bit further, okay? But the idea is that our bodies are incredibly efficient in terms of the nervous system working out where we are in space. On our joints and a whole load of other things, we've got these little things called mechanoreceptors and heaps of other receptors that tell our brain, you are secure, okay? Efficient and secure. And they notice this from around the joints, okay? So when, I don't know if you've done it as yoga teachers, when you tell somebody to who's hyperextending, like this, bend your arm a little bit. That means you've taken them to a place where their bones are not touching their bones, okay? So the equivalent would be if somebody's, this is the end of their range, so it's a dead straight, perfectly aligned thing, saying to them, no, your bones are touching, bend a little bit. Because both of them, the bones are touching. Do you understand?
Mm.
Okay, so just because the bones are touching in this range is caused by the shape of the bones. That's it. If this bone here was bigger, it would stop here. It just stops there, okay? But either way, you're putting pressure on the bones, and we know that pressure on bones is compressive, and it's good. Or either way, you are putting pressure on the tendons and pulling. Either way, it's good. It just depends on the load that you're doing, if it's too much, too soon. So I always give this example. You're in a plank, somebody's hyperextending their elbows. You say micro-bend your elbows because you might get injured. Are you going to tell them the same thing in handstand? No. Why not? Because they need to lock their arms. And if they're locking their arms and their joints are on top of their joints, that's where they need to be in a handstand. You know, some people can do it with bent arms, of course. But to actually actively tell someone, bend your arms, is going to take them down a whole new proprioception journey where there's no messages or less, let's say, less messages coming up to the brain and saying, you're fine, you're safe. The brain, it's going to be going, what are you doing, you crazy woman? Keep your arms straight. Don't bend them. Yeah. Okay. So, and again, explore around it a little bit and think about it. Like if you look at the bones, look at the joints, think about what's in them. Like when you start understanding what's actually in joints, you know, the joint capsules, the ligaments, the tendons, if we are loading them, you know, there's always this thing in yoga as well. We'll go down the dark journey when we get to shoulders, that if you externally rotate, you're not going to get shoulder injuries because stuff won't get pinched. Of course, stuff is going to get pinched if you're in a handstand. It's like there's ligaments and joints and whatever. There's no big space there while you're in a handstand. There's your whole body weight. You know, it's like me picking up a 30-kilogram weight and pushing it up there. There's stuff there, there's no space, it's just stuff. So as you go along the course, you're going to get to know more and more and more, and then all of these are such big, vast concepts which I like to bring in the beginning, so that then you can go, hey, hang on a second, and start to explore them on a more minute level when we start to really get paring down to things. You know, we can have lots of arguments as we go along, and I love it because that's the debate. Okay, so last question, Eva. No one else has a question. do you? And then we can go. If you need to pop off you go. Eva?
I just wanted to add, I always ask myself, what do I want, or what do I want to teach the students? Do I just want them to survive my yoga class, or do I want them to be able, in a situation where maybe the ground is unstable or where something unforeseen happens, be able to have a motion pattern in their brain that can get them out of this situation? So this might not be the ideal pose of the bones and whatever, that might not be the correct alignment, and experimenting in poses with different alignments actually helps us in our everyday life, because everything will not be like optimal and perfect. So actually getting more information to the brain in situations that are not optimal will help us in these situations when the environment is not as safe as in our yoga class. Because in our yoga class there is no loading, there is loading, but it's not a sudden change of direction or whatever involved. So it's a relatively safe environment to experiment with different kind of motions and different kind of angles in joints and whatever. And we don't want, like, I totally understand that if you want to have the elbow with a hypermobility or the hyperextension, if I do a sport where force transmission is really, really, really important, and I want to use my muscles as efficiently as possible because I want to, I don't know, throw a ball as far as possible, then because force is transmitted in a straight line, it might be better to not extend the elbow to the furthest a person can, because it will be better to have a straight line in the arm so that the force that is transmitted can go straight out the arm and produce the distance that I want to throw. But if I'm in yoga, I'm not interested in this. So it might be better to prepare people for their lives instead of
yeah. And it really does depend, but I think I also think that, and this is my last thing and then I've got to disappear, I think that, you know, people come to yoga generally to do yoga. You know, I'm not talking about the people that end up being yoga teachers and those things. Generally, people go into a yoga class. Why? They want to move, and they want to move in the particular yoga type shape. They want to move. They quite like, I'm sure, to get a little bit stronger, play a little bit with flexibility, and have some fun and develop. They don't even know they're developing a skill. You know, it's just movement. You know, whether it's serving us for life or not, they just like to move. And we've become so fear-based as yoga teachers, you know, cueing endless sort of protective stuff, that we're going to challenge our minds as we go through the course, and we will see how you guys pop out at the end of it and how many arguments we have. That was a fantastic discussion. I didn't get anywhere, and we covered pretty much everything I wanted to cover. So let me know if you've got any questions about anything, one-on-one things, and I will see you again on Thursday, I think, for more chats. Yes, Eva, bye guys. If you need to pop up. Yeah, Eva?
I
can't hear you, on mute.
There is the anatomy work due on, I don't know when, I think tomorrow. What is the anatomy work?
I think it's on the weekend, isn't it? When is it due? The anatomy work, you were emailed the documents. Okay.
Ah, okay. This is the anatomy work. Okay.
So it really is just, it's just, I want you to be guided through what is more important in terms of what you need to know. So it's really just a guide to sort of pull you through the kind of biomechanics of flexibility and things like that, and make you realize that you don't actually need to know it. Some of you may be more interested, others not so much. It literally is just you filling out a few things. It's no big deal. It's a guide. It's not a test. It's that document, and at some stage on your schedule it says send it to me. But it's just, you know, don't worry about it. It's not a test. I'm not going to shout at you if you get it wrong, etc., etc. It's just, it's kind of to prompt you to watch and try to understand some of the concepts around it. Okay. All right, guys, have a nice evening. Bye. Nice to chat. Bye.
Bye.
Cute waving.